Okay, so meditation, um, I know you know what you're probably thinking. Meditation really, I can barely find time to like fold the laundry, let alone, sit in blissful silence.
Right.
But what if I told you that there's a way to tap into that inner peace, without needing a yoga mat or like a silent retreat?
Yeah, that's precisely what's so fascinating about Osho's approach in the Book of Secrets. He takes, these ancient meditation techniques from the Vijnana Tantra,
Hmm.
and he makes them accessible, for people like us, people with deadlines and dirty dishes and, uh, yeah, even unfolded laundry.
Yeah, 112 techniques. It's like a meditation mixtape.
Right.
There's got to be at least one that speaks to even the most skeptical, like time-crunched person, right?
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is Osho doesn't believe there's a one-size-fits-all when it comes to meditation.
Yeah.
He encourages, exploration, finding what resonates with you on a personal level.
So no judgment if I can't sit still for hours on
Yeah.
end.
Not at all. In fact, one of the things that struck me most about the Book of Secrets is how Osho redefines what meditation can even be.
Okay.
He says you can find it in everyday actions, like walking, breathing, even laughing. It's about bringing a heightened awareness to whatever you're doing.
So it's not about like escaping reality, but about fully inhabiting it.
Exactly. Osho was all about embracing life in its entirety, not trying to transcend it. And that's what makes his approach so relevant, I think, to our modern lives.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's get specific. One technique that caught my eye was watching the gap between breaths. I'll admit, when I first tried it, I felt a little silly, just sitting there like hyper aware of my own breathing. But then something interesting happened.
Tell me about it. What did you notice?
Well, at first it was just a lot of mental chatter. Am I doing this right? Does this even work? But then in those tiny pauses between the inhale and the exhale, those gaps, my mind actually quieted down. It was like a brief glimpse of stillness amidst all the noise.
That's precisely the point. Osho describes it as catching a glimpse of pure awareness. And here's where it gets really interesting. That awareness, once you tap into it, it doesn't just vanish when you stop focusing on your breath. It starts to kind of seep into other areas of your life.
Okay.
You might find yourself more present in conversations, more attuned to your senses, or even just less reactive to stressful situations.
So it's like building a mental muscle. The more you practice that awareness, the stronger it becomes and the more it impacts like your daily life.
Exactly. And there's a quote from the Book of Secrets that really brings this home. Between two thoughts, there is a gap. Catch hold of that gap. It is the seed of awareness. So it's not about emptying your mind completely, but rather about becoming aware of the spaces between thoughts.
That's so much more approachable than trying to like shut down my brain completely,
Right.
which, let's be honest, is impossible. But okay, Osho also talks about things like shaking your body as a form of meditation. That one seems a little less, well, subtle.
Right. And that's where Osho really starts to challenge conventional ideas about meditation.
Yeah.
He believed that suppressing emotions is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Yeah,
Eventually, it's going to explode.
yeah.
So techniques like shaking are about releasing that pent-up energy in a conscious way.
So instead of bottling up our anger, we should just shake it out.
Yeah.
I can see this going very, very wrong if people aren't careful.
Osho's approach does require a certain level of self-awareness, for sure.
Yeah.
But the point isn't to just flail around wildly.
Right.
It's about consciously channeling that emotional energy and expressing it physically, but with awareness.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how these techniques, even the seemingly strange ones, all tie back to this idea of being present and aware. But Osho doesn't stop there, right? He also has some pretty radical views on love and relationships.
Absolutely. And I think this is where things get especially relevant for a lot of people. We all crave love and connection, but so often we approach relationships with a sense of possessiveness, with expectations, and a fear of losing the other person. Osho challenges us to kind of let go of that clinginess and experience love without attachment, without trying to control the other person.
But how do you love someone without, loving them? It sounds like he's advocating for like some sort of detached indifference.
Not at all. It's about recognizing that true love isn't about possession or control.
Okay.
It's about allowing the other person the freedom to be themselves and, in turn, finding your own freedom in that letting go.
Okay, so it's more about shifting your perspective on what love is, rather than trying to shut down your feelings altogether.
Exactly. And this ties back to the whole idea of witnessing that we've been talking about.
Okay, yeah.
Osho suggests that instead of getting caught up in the drama of jealousy, possessiveness, those intense emotions that often come up in relationships,
Yeah.
we can simply observe them without judgment, just like we observe the breath.
So it's like applying those same meditation techniques to our love lives.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of reacting, like impulsively, we take a step back, observe the feeling, and choose how to respond.
You're getting it. And here's where it gets really profound. By doing this, you start to dissolve the ego.
Okay.
You realize that you are not those fleeting emotions. You are the awareness that observes them. And that realization can be incredibly freeing.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued, but also, like, a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
We've only scratched the surface here, and we've already covered breath work, shaking, and love. There are like 111 other techniques in this book.
And that's what makes it so exciting. The Book of Secrets really is like a buffet.
Yeah.
You don't have to try everything at once. You
Right.
can sample, experiment, and find what nourishes you.
So for our listeners who are, like, just starting to dip their toes into Osho's world, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
Approach it with an open mind and a sense of playfulness. Don't take it too seriously. The goal isn't to become a meditation master overnight.
Right.
It's about exploring these techniques and seeing which ones resonate with you.
Sounds like good advice to me. And maybe even have a little fun along the way.
Absolutely. After all, Osho believed that laughter itself could be a form of meditation, but we'll save that one for later.
Okay, so laughter as meditation, that's definitely going on my to-try list.
Mm.
But for now, I'm still reeling from all these other techniques we've been, like, unpacking.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest for sure. But that's the beauty of the Book of Secrets, right? It's packed with so much wisdom and practical guidance.
Speaking of practical guidance, earlier we touched on the stopping the world technique. It sounded super intriguing, but I'll admit I'm still a little fuzzy on, like, how it actually works.
Yeah, it's one of those techniques that's deceptively simple to describe, but surprisingly profound in its impact.
Okay.
Essentially, it's about cultivating a state of heightened awareness by consciously stopping your internal world, even if just for a moment.
Okay, when you say stopping your internal world, do you mean, like, completely blanking out your thoughts? Because that sounds like a recipe for a mental crash.
Not quite. It's more about hitting the pause button on your mental chatter.
Yeah.
That constant stream of thoughts that usually, keeps us from fully experiencing the present moment.
Okay.
Imagine you're walking down, a busy street, completely absorbed in your to-do list or planning your next meal.
Right.
With the stopping the world technique, you choose to interrupt that mental narrative and simply become aware of your surroundings.
So instead of thinking about, you know what I need to pick up from the grocery store, I'm suddenly noticing, like, the details of the street, the sounds, the smells of people passing by.
Exactly. And not just noticing them passively, but really absorbing them, like with all your senses. The texture of the brick beneath your feet, the warmth of the sun on your skin,
Oh.
the laughter of children playing nearby. It's about becoming fully present in that moment, as if time has stopped.
Yeah, it's starting to get the picture. But how do you actually do that? Do you just, like, snap your fingers and suddenly become, like, hyper aware of everything?
It's more about cultivating a shift in your attention. Osho doesn't give like a rigid formula for this technique.
Okay.
Because it's really about finding what works for you. But a good way to start is by simply choosing like random moments throughout your day to practice. Maybe you're waiting in line at the coffee shop,
Yeah.
or stuck in traffic,
Yeah.
or even just, washing dishes.
Right.
Instead of letting your mind wander, use that time to kind of stop the world and become present.
So I'm standing there at the coffee shop, and instead of, like, scrolling through my phone or mentally composing a grocery list, I choose to, like, notice the aroma of the coffee beans,
Yeah.
the sound of the milk steamer, the barista's tattoos.
You got it. It sounds almost silly, but it's about training yourself to shift your focus from the internal to the external, from the past and future to the here, right now. And you might be surprised by what you discover when you actually start paying attention.
Now that you mention it, I remember this one time when I was feeling incredibly stressed and overwhelmed. I was walking home from work, and I decided to try, this stopping the world thing. I focused on the feeling of the pavement under my feet, the sound of the leaves rustling in the wind.
Yeah.
And for those few minutes, I felt this sense of, like, calm wash over me.
Yeah.
It was like all the stress just, like, melted away.
That's a perfect example of how powerful this technique can be, and here's where it gets really interesting. By interrupting that like constant mental chatter, you create space for new insights and perspectives to emerge.
Oh.
It's like clearing the clutter from your mental desktop, allowing for like fresh ideas and creative solutions to bubble up.
So it's not just about, finding peace in the moment, but also about potentially like unlocking new ways of thinking and problem solving.
Exactly. And this connects back to the idea of witnessing that we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
By stopping the world, you're essentially stepping back from your thoughts and emotions and observing them with, a detached awareness. And in that space of detachment, you gain a new level of clarity and understanding.
Okay, I'm definitely going to give this a try. But honestly, the more we talk about, you know, Osho's techniques, the more I realize how much they challenge conventional thinking.
Right. He was definitely a rebel in many ways, but that's what makes his teaching so relevant even decades later. He wasn't afraid to shake things up and challenge the status quo, which is something I think we can all benefit from, especially in a world that often feels like chaotic and overwhelming.
So for our listeners who are, intrigued by this stopping the world technique,
Hmm.
do you have any tips or words of wisdom? Like, where do we even begin?
Honestly, the best way to start is to just, experiment. Pick a time and place where you can step away from distractions for a few minutes.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be anything like formal or complicated. Just focus your attention on your surroundings as if you're seeing them for the very first time. Notice the details, the sensations, the subtle nuances that you might usually miss.
And what if my mind starts to wander? Which, let's be honest, it probably will.
That's completely normal. Don't get discouraged. Just gently redirect your attention back to your senses. Remember, it's a practice, not a perfection. Over time, you'll find that it becomes easier to access that state of heightened awareness and to like integrate it into your daily life.
I love that. It's not about, achieving some sort of Zen-like perfection, but about simply practicing, experimenting, and finding what works for you. Kind of like Osho's approach to meditation in general.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the heart of what the Book of Secrets is all about. It's a guide to discovering your own unique path to inner peace and self-discovery.
So we've explored breath work, shaking it out, love is meditation, and now stopping the world.
It's amazing how Osho kind of weaves together these seemingly like disparate ideas into like a cohesive philosophy.
That's the brilliance of his approach. He understood that we're all complex beings and that there's no single path to enlightenment. It's about finding what resonates with you on a personal level and using those tools to navigate the challenges and joys of life.
So for our listeners who are feeling inspired to, explore Osho teachings further, what would you say is the most important takeaway from like this discussion?
I think the key is to remember that meditation isn't just about, sitting in lotus pose and chanting Om. It's about cultivating a state of awareness that can be accessed, like anytime, anywhere, and in any activity. Whether you're watching the gap between breaths or stopping the world, the goal is to reconnect with that inner stillness that already exists within you.
Beautifully said. And as we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into the Book of Secrets, I'm left with a sense of both, like excitement and possibility.
There are so many more techniques to explore and so much potential for growth and transformation.
I completely agree. And I'm eager to continue this journey of discovery with you as we delve deeper into Osho's teachings and uncover the hidden gems within the Book of Secrets.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Osho's The Book of Secrets, from watching the gap between breaths to stopping the world.
Yeah.
These techniques are all about bringing, more awareness into our lives.
And what's fascinating is how Osho challenges us to apply that awareness, not just to like our meditation practice, but to all aspects of life, including, how we deal with our emotions.
Right. We touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting because Osho's perspective on emotions is pretty radical, right?
Mm.
He encourages us to express them fully, but with awareness.
Yeah.
It feels so counterintuitive to everything we're usually taught about keeping our emotions in check.
It does go against the grain, doesn't it? We're often told to like suppress our anger,
Yeah.
hide our sadness, even downplay our joy. Yeah.
But Osho believed that suppressing emotions is like trying to stuff a beach ball underwater.
Yeah.
It might stay submerged for a while, but eventually it's going to burst back up with even more force.
So instead of trying to like control our emotions, we should just let them run wild. I'm picturing like a lot of public meltdowns and awkward outbursts.
That's not quite what Osho was advocating for.
Okay.
It's not about, giving in to every emotional impulse. It's about finding a balance between acknowledging and expressing our emotions without letting them, control us.
Okay, so if I'm like feeling angry, instead of like screaming at the barista who messed up my order,
Right.
I should what? Sit there and stew in my anger.
Yeah.
Give it a hug.
It's more about consciously choosing how to respond to the emotion.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, you might notice the anger rising within you.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to push it down or, immediately reacting, you take a deep breath and simply observe it. Where do you feel the anger in your body? What sensations arise? What thoughts are swirling around? So it's like hitting that, pause button we talked about with the stopping the world technique.
Right.
Instead of immediately reacting, I'm creating a space between, like, the emotion and my response.
Exactly. And in that space, you have the power to choose. You might realize that the anger is stemming from something deeper than like a messed up coffee order. Or you might simply acknowledge the anger, allow it to pass through you, and then calmly explain the situation to the barista.
I can see how this would be incredibly helpful in dealing with, those everyday frustrations that tend to trigger us.
Right.
But what about those bigger, more intense emotions, like grief or heartbreak?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to just observe those too?
Those are the emotions we often try, hardest to avoid, right?
Yeah.
But Osho believed that running from our emotions only prolongs the suffering. He encouraged us to, lean into the discomfort, to experience the full intensity of those feelings, but with a sense of awareness.
It sounds terrifying, to be honest, but also, like, kind of liberating. Like, if you can face those dark, messy emotions head on, maybe you can actually move through them instead of letting them, like, hold you captive.
That's the paradox, isn't it? By embracing the darkness, we create space for the light to shine through. Osho believed that true emotional freedom comes from acknowledging and accepting the full spectrum of human experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So it's about becoming the, like, master of our emotions rather than being ruled by them. But honestly, how do we even begin to, like, cultivate that level of self-awareness? It feels like such a, like, lofty goal.
It's a journey, not a destination. And like any journey, it begins with a single step. Start by noticing your emotional patterns, what triggers your anger, what makes you, shut down emotionally, what brings you joy. The more you understand your own emotional landscape, the better equipped you'll be to navigate it with awareness.
So it's about, like, paying attention to those subtle cues within ourselves,
Mhm.
those, like, whispers of emotion that we often try to, ignore or dismiss.
Exactly. And remember, awareness is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. So the next time you feel an emotion rising within you, whether it's excitement, sadness, or even just plain boredom, take a moment to pause. Observe the feeling. Where do you feel it in your body? What sensations arise? What thoughts are associated with it? Don't judge yourself for having the emotion, just acknowledge it and allow it to be present.
It sounds like such a simple practice,
Yeah.
yet so profound in its, like, potential impact. And it's amazing to think that this is just one of the 112 techniques that Osho offers in the Book of Secrets.
And that's what's so inspiring about Osho's work. He provides such a rich and diverse tapestry of techniques, each offering a different path to self-discovery and inner peace.
Yeah,
It's like he's saying, here's a toolkit, now go out and create your own masterpiece.
that's a beautiful way to put it. And
Yeah.
for our listeners who are, like, feeling inspired to explore Osho's teachings further, what would you recommend as a good, like, starting point?
Pick up a copy of the Book of Secrets and simply start exploring. Don't feel like you have to try every technique or master them all perfectly. Choose one that resonates with you and give it a try. You might be surprised by what you discover about yourself and the world around you.
And remember, there's no right or wrong way to approach these techniques. It's about finding what works for you and integrating it into your life in a way that feels authentic and meaningful.
Exactly. Meditation is a gift, not a chore. And with a little curiosity and an open mind, you can unlock the incredible potential that lies within you.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Osho's The Book of Secrets. We hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to embark on your own journey of self-discovery.
And before we go, let me leave you with this thought-provoking question from Osho himself. If you are looking outside yourself for happiness, you are looking in the wrong direction. So, turn your gaze inward, explore the depths of your own being, and discover the infinite wellspring of peace and joy that resides within you.
What a beautiful sentiment to end on. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, the journey to inner peace begins with a single step.